After the committal service was over, the mother raced up to the grave and dumped something in.
There's something unsettling about the way death is handled, quietly, professionally, almost surgically, like an entire world operating just out of sight. Behind polished caskets and carefully rehearsed condolences lies a reality most people never witness. A reality filled with strange requests, unexpected moments, and stories that blur the line between respect and the bizarre. After decades inside this hidden industry, one man has seen it all. From celebrity funerals to situations so unusual they sound almost unreal. And just when you think you understand how this world works, one story changes everything, revealing how unpredictable, emotional, and deeply human the business of death truly is. The funeral industry isn't something most people ever truly see. From the outside, it feels controlled, structured, almost predictable. But once you step behind the curtain, that illusion disappears fast. What you find instead is a world shaped by emotion, urgency, and decisions people never imagined they'd have to make. Mike Steen has spent over 5 decades inside that world. 55 years of handling death in its rawest, most human form. Not just ordinary funerals, but high-profile services, complicated situations, and moments where things didn't go the way anyone expected. And when you talk to someone like that, you realize quickly, this isn't just a profession. It's a front-row seat to how people behave when everything else falls away. One of the first things that stands out is how often people assume there's a strict, unbreakable system behind funerals, that everything is regulated down to the smallest detail. But according to Mike, that's not always true. Take something as simple as burial choices. People often ask, can you be buried with your pet? Legally, that's usually not allowed in most places, but reality doesn't always follow the rule book. If someone places something inside a casket and doesn't announce what it is, no one's opening it up to check. It becomes less about regulation and more about trust, and sometimes quiet discretion. That same gray area shows up in ways you wouldn't expect. There was a case where, after a committal service had ended and everyone believed the moment was over, a grieving mother suddenly rushed toward the grave. Without warning, she dropped something in. No explanation, no announcement. Just a final, deeply personal act. And in that moment, Mike made a choice, not as a technician, not as a rule enforcer, but as someone who understands grief. He didn't stop her, because sometimes what matters isn't procedure, it's what that person needs in that exact second. That's the kind of judgment this job demands. Not everything can be taught. Some things you only learn by standing in the middle of it. Then there are the questions people are almost afraid to ask out loud. Like, do bodies ever get mixed up? It sounds like something out of a nightmare, but the truth is, it has happened. Not often, but enough to remind you that this system, like any other, depends on human accuracy. In one situation, 2 individuals who had died in the same incident were mistakenly switched before arriving at their respective funeral homes. And because multiple professionals had interacted with the bodies, everyone involved became part of the fallout. That's another side of this industry people don't think about. The legal pressure. One mistake, even if it wasn't yours, can pull you into a situation you never expected. And yet, despite all of that, Mike describes most families the same way. Kind, grateful, human. Whether they're well-known or completely unknown, doesn't really change that. Behind the scenes, grief levels everything. The status disappears. The image fades. What's left is just people trying to process loss in the only way they know how. Of course, that doesn't mean things are always calm. There are moments that push emotional boundaries, situations where grief becomes physical, overwhelming, unpredictable, people collapsing, crying uncontrollably, or reacting in ways that seem extreme to an outsider. But inside that space, nothing feels too much. Mike learned early on something that shaped how he handles every situation. You didn't cause the grief, and you can't take it away. All you can do is guide people through it. That perspective changes everything, because instead of trying to control the moment, you learn to move with it. And sometimes, the unexpected doesn't come from the families. It comes from the circumstances. There was one instance during a service where Mike himself suddenly lost all strength and collapsed. completely out of nowhere. Later, it turned out he was coming down with a virus, but in that moment, to everyone watching, it looked intentional, almost symbolic. One attendee even described it as a powerful gesture, as if he had laid down and kissed the ground during the ceremony. That's the strange thing about funerals. Meaning isn't always created by intention. Sometimes people see what they need to see. Then there's the side of the job that deals with logistics. Things that sound simple until you realize how complex they can become. Transporting a body, for example, isn't just about moving someone from one place to another. It involves coordination, timing, documentation, and occasionally, things go wrong. In one case, a body being transported by plane wasn't unloaded during a stopover and missed its connecting flight. Meanwhile, the family was already preparing for the wake, expecting their loved one to arrive. Imagine that call. Imagine trying to explain that situation while people are already grieving. And yet, even in moments like that, the focus stays the same. Solve the problem, protect the family from additional stress, and keep things moving forward. Because at the end of the day, that's what this role really is. Not just managing death, but managing everything that surrounds it. The emotions, the expectations, the unpredictability, and sometimes the stories that come out of it feel almost impossible to believe, until you realize they actually happened. What makes this world even more fascinating is how deeply personal it becomes once you step into it. Over time, you start to see patterns, not in death itself, but in how people respond to it. Some families want everything done quickly, quietly, almost as if moving fast will make the pain easier to handle. Others hold on to every moment they can, stretching time in ways that might seem unusual to an outsider, but feel completely necessary to them. Mike has seen both. There have been families who kept their loved ones close for days, even weeks, before final arrangements were made. As long as the body was properly prepared, there was nothing legally stopping them. And while it might sound unsettling at first, for those families, it brought comfort. It gave them time to process, to say goodbye in their own way, without pressure, without a clock ticking in the background. Then there are the small, deeply human details that most people never think about, like what goes inside a casket. It's not just formal clothing and presentation. Sometimes it's objects that define a person's life, things that meant something only to them. A small statue, a personal item, even something as simple as a familiar accessory that made them feel like themselves. And in one surprising case, a man was buried wearing an expensive Rolex watch, simply because no one in the family wanted it. Moments like that make you realize something unexpected, how quickly material value disappears when faced with loss. What once mattered suddenly doesn't, and what truly matters isn't something you can hold. There's also a strange intersection between tradition and change in this industry. Funerals today don't look the way they used to. Costs have risen dramatically, and for many families, cremation has become less of a choice and more of a necessity. Not because they prefer it, but because financially, it's the only option available. That shift has quietly transformed the entire landscape. Where there were once long visitations and multi-day services, now everything is condensed. Faster, simpler, more transactional in some cases, and while the meaning is still there, the experience feels different. But even with all these changes, one thing hasn't shifted at all: grief. It doesn't evolve with trends. It doesn't adapt to pricing or logistics. It stays exactly as powerful, as unpredictable, and as deeply human as it's always been. And that's something Mike understands better than most. After decades in this field, he doesn't talk about closure the way people casually do, because from his perspective, there is no real endpoint. Loss doesn't disappear. It just changes shape over time. That's a difficult truth, but it's also an honest one. And maybe that's what makes these stories so compelling. Not just the unusual moments or the behind-the-scenes details, but the reminder that beneath all of it, this is about people navigating one of the hardest experiences life has to offer. So if any part of this surprised you or made you see things differently, make sure you like the video, share it with someone who'd find this fascinating, and subscribe for more stories you won't hear anywhere else. And here's something to think about. If you had to choose, would you want your final arrangements planned out in advance or left completely in the hands of your family? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm really curious to see how people think about this.